this crazy thing got here. So the 1950s, the Cold War is at its height. The US is backing the Batista regime in Cuba, which is super corrupt. And then suddenly, by 1959, to everybody's surprise, Cuba's revolution, their socialist revolution, is actually successful in overthrowing the Batista regime, and the US is kicked out. So as the Castro government is setting up its new government, they set up very quickly a new agency for cinema and culture, and want to start a national cinema because Cuba had none before that to speak of. So to do that, they need help. They need creative help, they need technical help, they need cameras, film, they need experienced filmmakers to help them set up a movie-making, a national cinema movie-making infrastructure. And guess which nominally socialist superpower that had decades of propaganda filmmaking experience jumped at the chance and wanted to throw endless resources at them. I'll give you a hint. This is the first socialist revolution in the Western Hemisphere. It's 90 miles from the US, and this is the height of the Cold War, the Soviet Union. So the Soviet, between the Kremlin and Mosfilm, they decide on Mikhail Kalatozov and cinematographer Sergei Yurosevsky, who had just won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival in 1958 for The Cranes Are Flying. And it's decided that they are going to steer this first Cuban-Soviet co-production. So Russia sends over these guys, tons of cameras, cranes, dolly, tracks, film stock, and they're given carte blanche by the Castro regime as far as crews, creative assistance, travel, and they're permitted to shoot basically anywhere, which they do for 14 months. But of course, no one in the Soviet Union has any idea what a tropical island country is like, and so there's a lot of culture shock. But they got along very well with their Cuban collaborators, even though the Soviet team would end up sort of steering the whole ship for this movie. And yeah, by all accounts, they all got along really well and inspired each other, and they were excited. But the filmmaking team was acutely aware of what weird outsiders they were, coming from the cold, frigid East, and sort of kept adjusting how they were going to make this, how they were going to approach it, not having a clue about, knowing that they couldn't take in, the whole of Cuban culture. So if the assignment from the Kremlin was to produce a movie meant to spark a socialist revolutionary fervor across Latin America, what they would actually get, which you're about to see, is a poetic, lyrical art film with no central characters, very little dialogue, and upon its final release 2 years later in 1964 in Cuba and the Soviet Union, and only those countries, it flopped immediately and didn't play to either audience. It played for about a week and then was embarrassed. It was just stowed away in a Soviet vault to be forgotten forever until the 1990s in America, of all places. Of course, this was never circulated in the US because the US didn't circulate Soviet movies. So in 1992, an unsubtitled print was procured for a retrospective of Kalatozov's work. Despite its, as you'll see, sort of clumsy and dated message, It absolutely floored everybody who saw it without subtitles. And it's fun to look back at those reviews from 1995, this sort of fully formed masterpiece full of camera techniques that still weren't possible 2 decades after the advent of the Steadicam, suddenly appeared in this mind-boggling movie and that appeared out of nowhere, fully formed. Terrence Rafferty, who wrote for The New Yorker, said, after seeing it the first time, "They're going to be carrying out ravished film students out of the theater on stretchers." And we have provided ambulances and stretchers out here. So among those astonished by I Am Cuba were Francis Ford Coppola and Martin Scorsese. And they backed Milestone Films' first restoration of this and co-presented its release, which was unprecedented to have modern popular directors attach their name to all the publicity around it. And it also sort of launched this, the idea of restoring films that were considered lost at that time. So now what we're about to watch is a very improved new restoration by Milestone that was incredibly painstaking. They're dealing with various Soviet film stocks, including a secret Soviet military infrared film stock, which we'll see right from the beginning. And so having to deal with all those elements, and that were also in these cameras that were flung around God knows how, it merited like frame by frame restoration. So I hope you will enjoy this unwieldy, bizarre, incredibly beautiful beast. And as far as our next, the next series for TARADROME, you will find out what that is with a beautiful trailer made by Jordan from Videodrome.